to respect every single person's time who showed up on time. And so we are going to get right to it. I'm super excited about the topics that we're going to be doing today. But before we get into that, I want you to type in the chat real quick, where are you joining us from? So if you're in an individual place where you have access to the keyboard, just go ahead and type in there. If you're in an office setting, which I know many of you are, maybe somebody can get up, just type and let us know where you're joining us from. We have people in here from one side of the US all the way up into Canada, and who knows where around the world you're coming from. But go ahead and put in the chat. Just let us know where you are joining us from. And what I would like to do for those that have done sessions with me in the past, we're upgrading, we're doing things a little different. We actually have a moderator for this session, and our moderator is going to be handling the chat and taking care of all of the behind the scenes stuff that lets me focus on just giving you great content. So I want to take a moment to introduce to you Jan. So Jan, if you'll take it away and let them know what they need to know before we get started.
Got it. Thank you so much, Angel. So, hi everyone, I'm Jan and I'm from the Philippines, so we're 12 hours or at least 12 hours apart. Here are some general reminders for today's session with Angel Tucker, of course. First off, we'll start by reminding everyone that you will be muted for the entire time. So if you have any concerns, questions, please leave them in the chat and I will be taking note of them. Second one is that if you encounter anything you love or found to be helpful, feel free to use Zoom's built-in reactions for a better experience for everyone. And lastly, you will be asked to answer a post-meeting survey after this Zoom meeting. So once you answer that, you will be entitled to receive a free profile or assessment from Angel Tucker. So that's all. So if you have any concerns or questions, feel free to send them in the chat. And also be sure to send them to everyone or to me directly and not to Angel so that she can focus on the program itself. So that would be all. I'm yielding the floor back to Angel.
All right, thank you, Jan. So you will have two opportunities that we will cover questions. So if you think of a question, as Jan mentioned, just type it either to him in the chat or to everyone. He'll be monitoring both of those. Do not send it to me. I am not looking at chats at all. And if you hear something you love, if you have what we call an aha moment or a nugget that you said, hey, this was worth being on this training for, go ahead and give us a little heart or some sort of reaction there. We love to see those. And so the order of what we're going to cover, I am going to do a quick introduction to DISC for those that maybe are unfamiliar. And it's always great as a refresher. And then I'm also going to then go into the perceptions, which is one of our two topics today. How can we be seen by personalities who are different from ours, and why is it important to know that? And then we're going to talk about each personality type and how they're different depending on whether they're under control or out of control. And you're going to have an opportunity to get some free stuff that is also new on this session. So again, if you have questions, type them in the chat. And when we get to one of the sections where we're going to allow questions, we will review anything that you have put in there. Now, really quick, Jan, if you can go ahead and put up on the screen, I wanted to let you know about the next event. I try to do one of these a month. And so the next one is going to be on April 17th, and you'll see that pop up there. If you want to scan that QR code to register, you will get a discount if you register for the next event by this Friday. And I'm actually going to be sending this to you via email. So don't feel like you have to take a picture right now if it's not convenient for you. You're still going to have an opportunity to register for the next session and get a discount. The next session is a little bit longer, so the individual pricing is slightly higher. The office pricing is still the same. And so we will make sure that every single person gets this, but I just wanted to let you know so you can save the date on your calendar of April 17th. All right, so let's talk about a brief description, just a quick introduction to DISC. Now, for those unfamiliar with what the heck is DISC, DISC is a model of human behavior that was developed in the 1930s. I believe it's the second oldest model. You may have heard of the oldest model called Myers-Briggs. But the great thing about DISC is it's very user-friendly. So you can talk to someone about it for a very short period of time and then understand it enough to talk to somebody else about it. And things are great, but if they don't do you any good, they don't help you, right? Kind of like technology. It's great unless you don't know how to use it. And so I want you to have a tool that you can actually feel comfortable using. And so that's why we use the DISC model, all right? And there are 4 personality types represented by each of the letters. So we have our dominant D, we have our inspiring I, we have our supportive S, and we have our cautious C's. Now, as I go through this quick overview, one thing that I want to make sure you're aware of is that every single one of you contain all 4 of these letters to some degree. So you're going to hear a word or something I say about each one that describes you. That's very, very normal. What we have found, though, is that 80% of the population is dominant in 2 out of the 4. So if you were to do an actual personality assessment, which, as we mentioned, you can do for free if you just do the little 30-second survey at the end of this, you're going to get 2 graphs, okay, on your assessment, but your graph is going to have 2 letters that are more dominant than the other 2, and that's the case 80% of the time. So don't think that you're wrong if you say, oh, I'm a D, but wait, why did I hear something in the C that describes me? That's the way it always is, okay? So you are a blend of all 4 of the letters we're going to talk about today. But if you can figure out someone's dominant letter, then it gives you an idea of what they need from you and how they need you to interact with them to create what I like to call win-win situations. Okay, so what are some of the benefits of using something like this? One is better communication. You see, everybody talks, but very few people actually communicate, because communication means that the message you were trying to send is the message they actually received, okay? And I don't know if you've ever had a situation where maybe you said something to someone, or maybe you even sent them a text or an email, and they got a totally different message than you intended them to get. Has that ever happened to you? Right? And so here's why that happens. Because you're speaking your personality language to everyone else. So if they're not like you, they're not going to receive the information or process the information the way that you intended them to. Okay, so you're going to improve your communication with others by using this. And guess what happens when you have better communication with people? You also have better connections with people. All right, so you're going to have better connections. You're going to have better understanding. Watch this. You can reduce conflict. We could use less of that, right? You can reduce turnover if you're a business owner. You can reduce turnover by understanding what each personality needs from you to feel appreciated. You can increase productivity. You can increase your sales. So it's going to help you do things proactively instead of reactively. And trust me, there's a significant difference in cost between those two, okay? One of them makes you money and one of them costs you a lot of money, all right? Now, if you don't understand the personality type of the person on the other side of the conversation, then what happens is by default, you're going to interact with them the way that you like to be interacted with, which is great if they're like you, but what if they're not? Okay, so you really want to keep that in mind. We've all heard the saying, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? We've all heard that. We call it the golden rule. And it's a great rule when it comes to morals and ethics and how we treat each other as people. But the golden rule of communication is very different, okay? The golden rule of communication is do unto others as they would have you do unto them. Do you see the difference? And so we have to interact with people the way they need us to in order to get whatever it is we want. And that's what I call a win-win situation. Okay, so let's do a brief overview of the D personality. Now, the letter D stands for dominant. The dominant personality is outgoing and they're task-oriented. What does that mean? It means everything in their life is about getting stuff done. They love to check things off that to-do list. In fact, sometimes they'll write down things they've already done just for the pleasure of marking them off. Okay, if you're a D, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, this is only about 10% of the population. If you're a D, you're surprised by that. You're surprised you're only 10%, because what you likely do is surround yourself by other Ds. All your friends are Ds. The only one that's not a D is the one you're in a relationship with. And then you wonder what's wrong with them because they're not like you, okay? And so Ds are only 10% of the population. This is also surprising to people who aren't Ds. You know why? Because when there's a D around, you're going to know it. So it seems like there's more of them than there really are. And if you're in an industry such as real estate, which many of you are, that attracts Ds naturally, of course, there's going to be more than 10% in the industry. So again, you're around Ds more often. So it appears that there's more of them than there really are. All right. Now, here are some words that describe this personality type. Ds are demanding. They are direct. You don't have to wonder what a D's thinking. They're just going to tell you, okay? They're also very determined, okay? They're determined. They're decisive. This personality can make very quick decisions. And in fact, they get annoyed by people who can't make quick decisions, especially if it's keeping them from doing whatever it is they need to do, right? D's are doers. They like to get things done. In fact, you don't sleep well at night because you're thinking about all those things you need to get done the next day, okay? They're also a director. They like to tell other people to get things done. D's are dogmatic. Nothing stands in their way. If they want something bad enough, they're going to figure out a way to get it. And they're also dreamers. Now, I don't mean silly daydreaming. I mean, I can make some big things happen, okay? They're very diligent. They're dynamic. Now, here's the challenge word for you Ds. Sometimes you can be just a little defiant, okay? I know that's a surprise to you if you're a D, but yes, you can be defiant. Now, here's the basic needs, and I'm going to give you the basic needs of each of the personalities, because if you can't remember how to interact with a personality, meet their basic needs, okay? If you can meet their basic needs, you're going to be on the right road to creating that win-win situation that you want. So here's what a D needs from you: choices, challenge, and control. Choices, challenge, and control. And if you can give them those things, you're going to be on the right road with them. Now, this is the personality that believes time is money, okay? They move fast, they think fast. As I mentioned, they don't sleep well at night because they're thinking about everything they have to do, all those tasks they have to do the next day. When they go to a restaurant, they're ready to order as soon as the server comes over, okay? They're there because it's a task. Everything is a task to a D, okay? The task is to get full. They get full, they move on to the next task, all right? In fact, if they're a really good D, they'll ask for the server to bring the check when they bring their food, so they don't have to wait on them to get the check at the end of their meal, okay? These guys are annoyed by people who are late. Now, here's something funny about them. It's okay if they're late because they have lots of stuff going on, right? Lots of important things, but nobody else is allowed to be late in the mind of the D personality. These guys are also natural problem solvers. They can see the solution very, very quickly. And in fact, they can get annoyed by people who don't have the ability to do that, all right? They are also the most productive of all the personality types. They get more done in the shortest amount of time than any other personality. Now, here are a few challenges for you. All right. You have self-imposed stress, more self-imposed stress than anybody else. Okay. Because you've already decided how you want something to go. And then if it doesn't go that way, you get upset, even if it doesn't matter. Okay. So here's some advice. Try to live by this. It is what it is. It is what it is. I'm a high D. I cannot control everything, right? Neither can you. Some things just are what they are. And so we also have to choose our battles, right? Because we'll tend to make a big deal out of everything. So if you're a D, I want to encourage you to start choosing your battles. Now, this personality type, their communication style is very bottom line. They don't want lots of details and information. Tell me what I need to know right now to get to work right now, okay? Very important that you communicate with each personality based on their communication style, not yours. All right. So that's a quick overview of the D. So give me a little raise. Give me a little hand if you are a D. Are you a D? Give me a little raise or type it in the chat. Yep, you nailed me, Angel. I'm a D. Are you married to a D? Who's married to a D? Here's one that usually has more. Who used to be married to a D? Okay. So if you are a D, you know a D, you're married to a D, you used to be married to a D, let us know. We would love to know that, yes, I just made a connection there with that information. Okay. And so let's move on to the inspiring I personality and give you a brief breakdown of them. Now, these guys are outgoing, just like our Ds, but they're people oriented. So instead of being motivated by getting stuff done, they're motivated by being with people. Okay. And so this is about 25 to 30% of the population. And here's words that describe them: influencing. They're great at influencing others. Inducing. They're good at drawing others in. They're very impressive. They're interesting. They're also impressionable. So the last movie they saw is the best movie they've ever seen. And the last restaurant they went to is the best restaurant they've ever been to. And the last person they were with is their best friend, because they don't remember what happened before that. Okay. These guys are very interactive. They're interested in what's going on around them. They're also interchangeable. They'll talk to the person in the taxi cab, the elevator, the grocery line. Doesn't matter. They don't meet a stranger. Okay. So they're great in sales, by the way. They like to feel important, but here's your challenge word. Sometimes you can be just a little bit illogical. Okay. Illogical. Now, the basic needs for this personality are approval and recognition. So what does that mean? That means let them know you love them, and let them know you love them in front of other people. Okay. Brag on them in front of other people. You're going to see an I come to life. Now, this personality loves to have fun. In fact, they are the funniest person they know. Okay. They can entertain themselves for long periods of time. They don't even need anybody else around to be entertained. And they physically hold on to people when they're talking to them. Okay. They'll either physically be holding on to you, or they're in your space. If you're a C, you know what I'm talking about your space. Like there's this invisible line. You're not comfortable with people cross that. Eyes will cross it. Okay. They also enjoy new experiences, things that have never been done before. And they love to be involved in every conversation in the room. In fact, they have a unique talent because they can hear every conversation. Okay. So if they're talking to you here and the conversation over there sounds much more interesting, they'll leave this one and go over there. All right. And they are usually running late. They have no concept of time. They're very forgetful, and their communication style is also bottom line. All right. They want bottom line information. Now, raise your hand if you're an I. Let us know if you're married to an I. Okay. If this sounds like anyone you know, we'd love to know it. So what about the S's? S stands for supportive. These guys are reserved, but they're people oriented, just like the I's. They just take a different approach. This is about 30 to 35% of the population. And here's words that describe them. They're soft-hearted. They're stable. They like to keep the status quo. They're very sentimental. They don't like change. They want it to stay the same. They can be very shy. They're very sweet. They're usually more submissive. They love to serve others. And sometimes they can be a sucker. Okay. They like to feel secure, but sometimes they can be a sucker. Now, here's what they need: appreciation and security. Okay. Now, this is the personality that always have time for others, no matter how busy they are. And they're the peacemakers. They make great mediators, and they show genuine concern and interest in other people. Okay. They have a very friendly demeanor. They're very respectful. They absolutely hate conflict. And the challenge for them is making a decision. And I mean, little things that are easy to anybody else could be a challenge for the S personality type. Okay. So their communication style, they like information, but they want it very easy to understand. All right. So who's an S? Who's married to an S? Let us know. Let's move on to our C's. C stands for cautious. These are reserved and task-oriented people. They're about 20 to 25% of the population. And here's words that describe them. They're competent. They're curious. They're careful. They're very calculating. They're critical thinking. They contemplate things. They're conscientious. They like things to be correct. They're conformist. They're consistent. Here's the challenge word. Sometimes they're a little critical, okay? Now, their basic needs are quality, answers, and value. So these are your 4-level deep thinkers, okay? They love to use charts and graphs and lists. They don't touch you unless you have a close relationship with them. And they love to plan as much of their day as possible, all right? And they're long-range thinkers. These guys can realize they need something 6 months before they need it, all right? Their toilet paper, by the way, has to be on the right way, okay? They'll turn it around in your house. It must go over. And they don't like surprises. No surprise parties, no surprise gifts. They don't want anything to be a surprise. And they have very high standards of themselves and other people. Now, their communication style, they want to know everything. Everything you know, they want to know, okay? Give it all to them and make it as complex as possible. They love dissecting information. So, who knows a C? Who is a C? Put it in the chat and let us know, right? Now, did you figure out your personality blend? Are you a DC? Are you an IS? What's your blend? If you figured out your top 2, we'd love to know that as well. Now, keep in mind, you contain all 4 of these letters, all right? And if you want to know more about this, I recommend, let's see, I have one right here. Get this book on my website, Stop Squatting with Your Spurs On. This is your Bible, guys, for communication, but it's also on Audible if you prefer to read audibly. If you're in Canada right now, please order it on Amazon, all right? And so it costs me more to ship it to you than you'll pay for the books, but it's available multiple places, so definitely pick that up. Now, I'm going to be asking questions here very, very soon. So remember, if you have a question, type it in the chat, either directly to Jan or to everyone, and we'll make sure we get those answered for you. So I'd like to talk for a few minutes about the perceptions on each personality type. And here's the truth, guys. Your perception, people's perception of you, their perception of you will also affect their reception of you, right? Now, it doesn't even matter whether their perception of you is true or not. That's the downside. All that matters is they think these things of you, okay? And so it's their reality of you. In fact, have you ever decided whether you like someone that you've never actually met? Right? You didn't like what somebody else told you about them, or maybe what they were wearing when they came in the room, or how they spoke to you on the phone. You've already made a decision, accurate or not, about how you would receive that person, okay? So it's important that we understand how people perceive us, because you can't be aware of something you're not first aware of, right? And so I want to take a look, and I'm just going to give you 6 for each letter. Now, if there's more, okay? And it doesn't mean, guys, that you're any of these things. It's just how you could be perceived by someone who's in a different personality letter than you, all right? So the dominant Ds, you guys can be perceived as pushy, as overbearing, as conceited, as unfeeling, as rude, and as bossy, okay? The inspiring I types can be perceived as self-centered, as naive, as dishonest, manipulative, unreliable, and a gossiper, okay? Again, doesn't mean you're any of these, all right? What about the supportive S? The supportive S can be perceived as indecisive, as weak, as a sucker, as having no confidence, okay? A lazy, a pushover, okay? The C types can be perceived as boring, inflexible, a whiner, cheap, judgmental, and unsociable, okay? So when you think of someone who's these personality types, do you also think of these words as describing them? Have you ever heard somebody say these words to you, that you're these things, right? Have you been told that by other people that they're different from this, right? It's never a positive experience. And so if we want to change the way people receive us, we have to also change the way they perceive us. Okay, so hopefully this has given you a little bit of food for thought, and maybe you can even reflect on a past situation that didn't go well, either because of the way you perceive someone else or maybe because of the way that they perceived you. All right. By the way, if you're not getting my free weekly video tips, this is absolutely free. I send them out every Wednesday, and you can get a free little 1-minute tip that just reminds you how to interact with each personality type. Okay, so if you want to start receiving those, then just email me, angel@usingdisc.com, or you can go on my website and opt in for that. But I'd love to get you on the list to start receiving those every single Wednesday, absolutely free. Okay, speaking of free, I'm also going to give you, if you email me and let me know that you want it, because I don't want to spam you with a bunch of stuff. I actually have this chart, and it shows on one side the natural strengths and challenges of each personality, but on the other side, it shows how you really are versus how you can be perceived. Okay, normally you have to pay for this, but because you're joining me today, it's going to be my gift if you want it. So just email me and put the word chart in the subject line. That's all you have to put the word chart, angel@usingdisc.com, and I will get that over to you right away. Okay, so this is our first opportunity for questions. I'm going to hop over to Jan. Jan, do we have any questions in the chat?
We have none so far.
Wow, I'm either doing a really good job or I am completely boring you and you cannot wait until this is over. I'm gonna assume I'm doing a good job. So I'm just gonna go with that. Okay. And so now I want to talk to you about personality types being different depending on whether they're under control or out of control. Now, keep in mind, guys, that a strength oftentimes pushed to extremes can become a weakness. Okay, so something that's normally under control pushed to extremes can become out of control. So keep that in mind. For example, being a hard worker. Okay, D's are hard workers, right? C's are hard workers, but pushed to extremes, you can become a compulsive worker, right? To the detriment of everything else. And guys, if you're 80 years old walking down the beach by yourself, what was it all for anyway? Okay, and so pushed to extremes, hard worker, not always good. What else? What about being compassionate? People who are compassionate or S personality types, you can turn into an enabler. Okay, you can actually kind of excuse people's actions and make excuses for them, which then gives them permission to keep doing it. Okay, so you have to be careful about that. What about being thrifty? Hey, that's great, but guess what that could turn into? Being a hoarder. Who's ever seen the show Hoarders? Every single one of those are out of control C personalities, okay? They won't throw away anything they perceive as having any sort of value. And so a strength pushed to extremes can become a weakness, all right? So I'm going to share a list with you of some of the examples of under control versus out of control. But keep in mind, this doesn't mean this is all of them. It's just to give you an idea. Jan, if you'll go ahead and put the D list up on the screen there. I wanted to use the screen so you guys aren't trying to remember these as I go through them really quickly. But you can see the difference there, guys. Under control, you're courageous, but out of control, you can be reckless, okay? Under control, you're quick to respond, but out of control, you're rude. Now, here's what I want to ask you as I'm going through these. If you are a D, I want you to do a little self-assessment here. I want you to ask yourself, which of these words describes me? Am I the under control word or am I the out of control word? Okay, so you can't be aware of something you're not first aware of, right? So which one are you? Under control, if you're a D, you're goal-oriented, but out of control, you can be impatient. Under control, you're results-oriented. Out of control, you're pushing. Under control, you're deliberate. Out of control, you're dictatorial. Under control, you're self-confident. Out of control, you're conceited. Under control, you're a direct. Out of control, you can be offensive. Under control, you're self-reliant, but out of control, you can be arrogant. Under control, you're straightforward. Out of control, you're abrasive. Under control, you're competitive. but out of control, you can be ruthless. Okay, so these are great insights. And if you've ever met an out of control D, in fact, tell me in the chat. Yeah, I've met one of those. It wasn't a good experience, was it? Okay. And so if we want to have the best possible interactions with others, we have to make sure that we are operating under the under control words. And then if you notice somebody operating in the out of control words, I'm going to give you some tips on how to help that situation go better. Okay. So let's move on to the I list. Jan, if you'll put the I personalities up there. So under control, and again, if you're an I, do a little self-assessment. Ask yourself, which of these two best describes me? Under control, you're optimistic, but out of control, you're unrealistic. Under control, you're persuasive. Out of control, you're manipulative. Under control, you're excited. Out of control, you're emotional. Under control, you're communicative, but out of control, you gossip. Under control, you're spontaneous. Out of control, you're impulsive. Under control, you're outgoing, but out of control, you're unfocused. Under control, you're expressive. Out of control, you're excitable. Under control, you're involved. Out of control, directionless. Under control, imaginative. Out of control, daydreaming. Under control, warm and friendly. Out of control, purposeless. Okay, so good to keep in mind there. So let's move on to the S one. And I see questions coming through, so I'm super excited about answering those as soon as we're done here. So again, if you're an S, if this is one of your top two, ask yourself which of these is describing you, okay? Under control, you're relaxed. Out of control, you can be perceived or you can be lazy, right? Under control, you're reliable. Out of control, dependent. Under control, cooperative. Out of control, you can be used by others. Okay, we kind of talked about that. Under control, you're stable. Out of control, indecisive. Under control, you're a good listener, but out of control, you may just completely shut down. Under control, you're single-minded. Out of control, inflexible. Under control, you're steadfast. Out of control, you may resist change. Under control, you're soft-hearted, but out of control, you're easily manipulated. Under control, you're systematic. Out of control, slow. Under control, you're amiable, but out of control, you can be resentful. Okay, now let's move on to the C. C's, do your self-assessment here. Which best describes you? Under control, you're orderly. Out of control, compulsive. Under control, logical. Out of control, you can be critical. Under control, intense. Out of control, unsociable. Under control, curious. Out of control, you're prying. Under control, teachable. Out of control, easily offended. Under control, cautious. Out of control, you're afraid of everything. Under control, you're correct. Out of control, you're inflexible. Under control, you're questioning. Out of control, doubtful. Under control, conscientious. And I don't know why that says Morrison. Thank you, Canva. That should say worrisome. Okay, I don't know who Morrison is, but he's clearly out of control. Under control, you're precise. Out of control, you are picky. Okay, so hopefully you did your little self-assessment there as we went through that list. Now, the thing is, knowing what you can normally expect from each personality kind of helps us notice when they're exhibiting some of those out of control traits, right? So what do? You notice somebody exhibiting out of control traits. What can you do, right? Well, first of all, it's time to have a conversation. It may be an uncomfortable conversation, but here's what I recommend you do. If you notice it's time to have a conversation with someone, you always want to do that from a place of love, never judgment, guys. We are all a train wreck, okay? We all have stuff that we wish we could go back and not have experienced, right? And so you always want to take an approach from a place of love and concern, never judgment. Now, here's the thing. People can't change what they don't first acknowledge. Okay, so maybe you see it in them, but they don't see it in themselves. And so there's a couple of things that you can do to try to get them to the place where they're now seeing what you see. The first one is through questions. Okay, there is such power in questions. The thing about questions is When your mind is asked a question, it's also programmed to answer the question. Now, the answer might be, I don't know. The answer might be, well, I don't want to answer that, which is an answer in itself, is it not? But when you ask questions, you're actually planting the seeds. Okay. So maybe they don't give you the answer, but they're answering it to themselves. So what are some questions you could ask? How about this? How have you been feeling lately? Is there anything you'd like to talk about? Has any significant changes happened in your life lately? Like, open the door. You know, a lot of times it's embarrassing. People don't want to talk about things. You know, sometimes people have trouble with a level of trust, especially if you're a C personality, very suspicious in nature. You don't like to talk about personal things. And so sometimes it takes somebody showing that they care enough to open the door and break down those barriers and start having the conversations, right? Now, if you've asked all the questions you can think of and you still don't feel like you're getting anywhere, another option, especially if this is somebody that works for you. Okay, let's say this is an employee of yours and you know they're valuable to you. You don't necessarily just want to let them go because they're going through some things. What can you do? Take these words, okay, and by the way, these words are in my book, Stop Squatting with Your Spurs On, and just type them all on a piece of paper randomly. Don't put, oh, these are the under control, these are the out of control. No, mix them all up, just type them randomly and ask them to circle the words they think describe them. Okay, circle the words that think describe them. If they're circling all of the under control words, now what you're going to do is you're going to give them a different color pen and you're going to say, now I'd like for you to circle the words that you think other people would say describe you. Okay, and see if that's the same list of words. All right, and hopefully this will kind of help them work through the fact, wow, yeah, I am being seen as some of these out of control things. I am portraying some of these out of control things. And hopefully that'll help you go back and start that conversation over again. Okay. So questions, I saw some popping up there. What do we got, Jan?
Yeah, we have several questions. And first one is from Steve. He's worried about the perceptions for his two dominant qualities. How do you overcome that?
Steve, that's a great question. And here's the thing. It has to be done consciously. Okay. You have to, before you even have a conversation with someone, stop and say, okay, the way that I'm about to say this, is that going to make me be perceived as any of these negative words? Right. And usually when you switch it and you speak to the person in their language, that eliminates the problem right there. Okay. It keeps from you having these perceptions, but you have to do it consciously and kind of run what you want to say through your head, which is so difficult because guys, guess what? Life is going on. And so we just, in fact, I have a training system, just in case you guys don't know this, I have a training system and it has, the length of the number of videos depends on whether you're in real estate or not. So up to 34 training videos that teach your company this type of stuff. So one of the videos is on creating a disc culture in your office, getting everybody to speak this language. And when you do the simple things it takes to do that, Steve, it makes it easier to step back and go, wait a minute, I was about to say it this way, but now I walk in and I see this personality. They're different from me because they're letters right there on their desk. So now I have to reframe it. And then that's going to help tremendously with those perceptions, but it must be done consciously. Okay. Great question. All right. What's next?
All right, we have a question from Petra. How does that work again? Out of control means pushed to limits or stressed?
Love it. So there can be a variety of things that contribute to somebody going to those out of control traits. That's a great question. Okay. So basically what you're doing with the out of control traits is this is where we don't want to go to this side. We want to make sure that we're not doing things, whether it be from stress, whether it be from, guess what? Trauma. You know, we all have, in fact, in my newsletters right now, every single month, I do a free newsletter, which you can also sign up for on my website. But right now we're in a series about triggers. Okay, we have emotional triggers, and it can be a circumstance, it can be even a word that we hear. And when we experience that trigger, we jump immediately to the out of control traits. And a lot of this is subconscious, right? And so that's why, Petra, it's good to be aware first of the fact that, okay, these are out of control traits, right? Because we can't be where something we're not first aware of. There's a variety of things that can cause you to go there. But once you have that awareness and then you catch yourself, oh my goodness, I'm out of control right now. I'm exhibiting one of these traits. And again, it goes back to what Steve said. A lot of this has to be done consciously, right? Because we have to first undo and then redo. Okay, great question. What else do we have?
Yeah, so I'll share this question on screen since it's a bit longer.
Ah,
So yeah,
okay.
how do you overcome perceptions based on what you do for a living?
Oh, I love that, Roy, right? And so, how do you overcome perceptions based on what you do for a living? Because guess what? Nobody wants to talk to the IRS guy, right? And so, it takes a little bit of extra effort. And again, this is conscious. So, what you have to do is you have to take time. Let's say I'm an accountant. I have to take time to build a relationship before I jump into business right away. Okay. And so, simple little changes like that, depending on who's across from me, because guess what? If I have a D across from me, they don't want you to take time to build a relationship. If you ask about their family or their dog or their life, that's not why they're there. So they'll say something like, that's none of your business. I'm here to get my taxes done, or whatever it may be. But if you're dealing with an I or an S, we don't want to jump into business right away. We want to take time to build those perceptions. Okay. But anything that you know is going to be a negative connotation, you just want to address that right up front. Okay. Hey, I know that people have a certain perception of accountants, and I just wanted to let you know that you can expect different from me because of A, B, and C. Okay. And so you just go ahead and address it ahead of time. And then that drops those barriers down that people may have of those perceptions and how they're going to receive you. Okay. Great question. What else do we have?
Yep. Next one is from Roy. He's asking, how do you know when you're leaning towards being out of control?
So this is a great question. We talked about this earlier. Remember how we have those list of words? Type up the list of words, hand it to someone else and say, how do you see me? Okay. And then if they start circling those out of control words, because sometimes we don't acknowledge things until we see them on paper. Okay. Let me tell you a quick story. I was doing a session one time, and I had a husband and wife both at this training. It was for franchise owners, and I had a husband and wife there. The husband's a high I, and so based on reading his assessment, he came to me at a dinner that night. He said, read my assessment for me. And I said, well, you're normally a high I, but you haven't been having as much fun lately. And he looked at me like I had three eyes. Okay. And he didn't know what I was talking about, but I was just telling him what his assessment said. And so later in the evening, his wife came up to me. She didn't know I even talked to her husband. And she said, what is my husband's personality type? And I told her, she said, well, I said he came out a high I. She says, yeah, well, I thought he was an I, but he hasn't been nearly as much fun lately. Okay. So she acknowledged it, but he hadn't yet acknowledged it. Does that make sense? So sometimes we have to go to somebody's perspective outside of us and say, how do you see me? Have you noticed any changes in me? Ask those same questions that you would be asking them, but ask them to do that for you. Okay. Great question. What else?
Yeah, and Lisa is also asking a very interesting question. Are people with disorders in any certain group of personality or disc? For example, people that are OCD.
Absolutely. That is a great question. So it's amazing how our personality affects our health and affects things like that. OCD is absolutely a C issue. Okay. Now, does that mean everybody that's C is OCD? No. What it means is most people that are diagnosed as OCD are C's. Attention deficit often are your I's. Anxiety, depression, your C's. Hypertension, things like that are your D's. So yes, it is absolutely related. Again, it doesn't mean that every D has hypertension, but when people are diagnosed with hypertension, they're likely a D, if that makes sense. Doesn't mean every I has ADD, but if they're diagnosed ADD, they're likely an I, which by the way, has a 97% error rate in diagnosing ADD. That's a whole nother training. Okay. So just be careful with your children. That's all I'll say. All right. Any more questions? I think we have time for one more. Do we have one more question, or are we good?
We have one. They're asking if they want the list of words you shared earlier, where do they get that?
That list, unfortunately, was created by an acquaintance of mine, Dr. Robert Rome. So unfortunately, it's not something I can send you, but it is. He did give me permission to put those in the Stop Squatting with Your Spurs On book, and I gave him credit for that. So get the book, you'll get the list. Okay. All right. Well, hopefully you guys had an amazing time. You gained some great nuggets, some insights from this. As I mentioned, there's going to be just a quick little 4-question, 30-second survey so we can make sure there's no ways that we can improve for you for the next call. I would appreciate your time completing that at the very end. It's literally 30 seconds, and you'll get a free personality assessment. From that, you can use for yourself or pass on to someone else if you like. Quick reminders. April 17th is the next event. I will be emailing all of you a flyer. If you use the registration, whoever registered, and I have your emails, you're the ones that are going to get the flyer. If you're in a group setting right now and you want the flyer, you need to email me, okay? Because otherwise I don't have your email. angel@usingdisc.com. I'll get that right over to you. You have until Friday to register at that discount, or of course, you could scan the QR code that was on the screen there a second ago. If you want the free chart, and a lot of you, my phone was blowing up with people messaging me just now. If you want the free chart, I'll get that over to you within the next hour. Just email me, angel@usingdisc.com, and put the word chart in the screen. If you want those free weekly video tips, you can email me or sign up on site. And guys, the best compliment you can give me is to tell somebody about me, okay? If you need a speaker for an event, virtual, live, if you are interested in getting my training system, I'd love, love, love to have those conversations with you. I've been honored to spend the last 45 minutes with you, and I hope that you found it time well spent. Hope you have an amazing day. Take care.
Thank you, Angel.